The CEO came back early from his trip and found his son being mistreated by his doctor, and what he did next. If this story interests you, subscribe to our channel and tell us which city you're watching from. Let's begin. If there was one thing Roderick Vance was proud of, it was having built a technology empire from scratch. At 45, the CEO of Tech Britain was recognized as one of the country's most influential entrepreneurs, with offices in London, Manchester, and Brighton. His fortune was incalculable, his network enviable, and his agenda always packed with international commitments. Born into a humble family from rural Cornwall, Roderick had sworn he would give his only son everything he never had in his childhood. Matthew, his 7-year-old son, was the light of his life. The boy with brown eyes and a wide smile had survived a severe car accident 2 years prior, which left him paraplegic. The tragedy occurred when they were returning from a weekend at Bournemouth Beach. A drunk driver hit their vehicle, and only by a miracle were there no even more serious consequences. Since then, Roderick had dedicated himself to providing his son with the best medical treatment money could buy. After the accident, Roderick completely restructured the mansion where they lived in the Clifton seafront area of Brighton. The imposing 3-story house, with sea views, gained elevators, access ramps, support bars, and a special room for Matthew on the ground floor, equipped with all available assistive technology. The pool was adapted for hydrotherapy, and an entire room was transformed into a physiotherapy space. But the jewel in the crown of Matthew's care was Dr. Louisa Marsden, considered the leading specialist in pediatric rehabilitation in the Southwest. With an impeccable resume, a postdoctorate in the United States, and several articles published in international medical journals, she had been hired at a premium to personally supervise the boy's recovery. Roderick, rest assured, Matthew is in excellent hands, Dr. Marsden guaranteed in her weekly video calls. While the businessman traveled the world closing multi-million-pound contracts, we are following the Canadian Rehabilitation Protocol, and the results are promising. To complement the team, Roderick had hired physiotherapists, nurses, psychologists, and private tutors, all coordinated by Dr. Marsden, who prepared detailed reports full of colorful charts and impressive medical terminology. The photographs sent to the father always showed a smiling Matthew, apparently in full process of adaptation and recovery. "Daddy, everything's fine," the boy would say during video calls, always in the doctor's presence. The conversations were short, Roderick always in a hurry, and Matthew strangely economical with words. That March morning, the Brighton sky dawned heavy, foreshadowing one of those tropical storms so common in the region. Roderick was in London for a meeting with foreign investors when he received news that the presentation had been cancelled. One of the main Japanese executives had fallen ill during the flight. Cancelled. Now what? "Monica?" he asked his personal assistant, as he watched the frantic movement of Oxford Street from his hotel window. "Sir, they've rescheduled for next week. You can take the opportunity to rest a bit or advance other commitments," Monica replied, already reorganizing her boss's digital agenda. Roderick was silent for a few moments. It had been almost a month since he had seen Matthew in person. All his interactions with his son were limited to quick video calls and hurried voice messages sent between one meeting and another. "Monica, prepare the jet. I'm going back to Brighton today." "But, sir, what about the meeting with the Dubai investors tomorrow?" "Cancel it. Say I had a family emergency." Roderick couldn't explain it, but he felt a sudden urgency to see his son. "And don't tell anyone at home. I want to make it a surprise." The flight from London to Brighton took less than 3 hours. Throughout the journey, Roderick reviewed the latest reports sent by Dr. Marsden, pages and pages detailing continuous progress, muscle development, positive psychological adaptation. Everything seemed perfect, perhaps too perfect. Upon landing at Brighton City Airport, Roderick dismissed the driver and took a regular taxi. He truly wanted to surprise everyone. The taxi dropped him in front of the mansion's imposing electronic gate. He used his fingerprint to quietly enter through the back, passing through the lush tropical garden that surrounded the property. The first thing that struck him was the silence. For a house that should house a multidisciplinary team in full working order, the silence was disturbing. There were no voices, No characteristic sound of physiotherapy equipment. Not even the noise of the television Matthew so liked to watch. "Hello, is anyone home?" he called, placing his Italian leather briefcase on the marble kitchen counter. No answer. A shiver ran down his spine when he noticed that the kitchen, always immaculate, showed signs of abandonment. A fruit rotting in the fruit bowl, dirty dishes in the sink, a faint smell of mold in the air. Where was Mrs. Josephine, the housekeeper he paid so well to keep everything in order? Fear began to set in when he realized the refrigerator was almost empty. Only a few expired yogurts, a half-empty water bottle, and leftover food in plastic containers. "Matthew? Son?" he called louder, now climbing the stairs towards the bedrooms. His heart pounded when he received no response. It was then that he heard it, a muffled sound like something being dragged across the floor. It came from Matthew's adapted room on the ground floor. Roderick ran down the stairs, almost tripping over his own feet. He pushed open his son's bedroom door with unnecessary force. The scene he found would forever be etched in his memory like a photograph of horror. Matthew was lying on the floor, between the bed and the window. His thin body, much thinner than Roderick remembered, trembled as the boy tried to reach for something under the bed. His clothes were dirty, his hair disheveled, and there were dark circles under his eyes that betrayed sleepless nights. "Matthew, my God, son!" Roderick rushed to the boy, taking him in his arms. Only then did he notice the reddish marks on the boy's arms, the abrasions on his back, visible through his torn t-shirt, and the smell of urine emanating from the mattress. The boy's eyes, once so bright, now widened in a mixture of surprise and relief at seeing his father. "Dad, you came back," he whispered in a weak voice. "What happened here? Where's your wheelchair? Where is everyone?" Roderick asked in despair, carrying his son to the bed. "She took it. She said I needed to learn to manage on my own." Matthew replied, tears streaming down his thin face. "Who, son? Who did this to you?" "Dr. Marsden. She said it was part of the treatment, that I was getting too spoiled." Roderick felt his blood boil. He looked around and realized that the room, which should have been a sanctuary of care, was in a state of neglect. None of the medical equipment seemed to have been used recently. The medications on the bedside table were disorganized, some bottles empty. The water bottle next to the bed was dry and dusty. "Where is everyone, son? The team, Mrs. Josephine? She sent everyone away last week. She said they were unnecessary, that they were hindering my independence." Matthew paused, breathing with difficulty. "Some days she doesn't come, Dad, and when she does, she just stays on her phone." Roderick helped his son drink some water he found in the adjacent bathroom. As Matthew drank in small sips, he noticed something even more disturbing. The boy's body was covered in small wounds that looked like bed sores, typical of someone who stays in the same position for too long without proper care. "Hi, where's your wheelchair, son?" he asked again, trying to control the rage growing inside him. "She disassembled it. She said I could only use it after I learned to value it." At that moment, the sound of the front door opening was heard. Light, confident footsteps crossed the entrance hall. Roderick immediately recognized the sound of the expensive heels he himself had gifted Dr. Marsden last Christmas. "Matthew, I'm here for our session." The doctor's melodious voice echoed through the house, completely different from the professional tone she always used in video calls with Roderick. The businessman placed a finger on his lips, asking his son to be silent. He kissed his forehead and whispered, "Everything will be all right now, son, I promise." Roderick left the room and closed the door silently behind him. He walked down the hallway with controlled steps, containing all the fury that threatened to explode. He found Dr. Marsden in the living room, calmly taking off her coat and placing her designer bag on the white leather sofa. She almost dropped her phone when she saw him. "Roderick, what a wonderful surprise. We didn't know you were coming back today." The professional smile instantly lit up her face, but her eyes betrayed nervousness. "If I had known, I would have prepared an updated report for—" "Where is the multidisciplinary team I hired to care for my son?" Roderick interrupted, his voice so cold it could freeze the tropical Brighton air. Dr. Marsden adjusted the pearl necklace on her slender neck, buying time to formulate a response. "Oh, today is a collective day off. I implemented a new rotation system to optimize resources and... lies. The word came out like a shot. I just found my son on the floor, dirty, dehydrated, and clearly neglected. Where is his wheelchair? The doctor's face changed instantly. The smile vanished, replaced by a serious, professional expression. Roderick, I know it may seem shocking to you, but I am implementing a revolutionary therapy based on Scandinavian studies. It's called Forced Autonomy Approach. The long-term results are impressive. So even if in the short term it seems, where is my son's wheelchair? Roderick repeated, each word pronounced slowly, as if speaking to a child. Dr. Marsden hesitated for a moment, then sighed. It's stored away. It's part of the protocol. Matthew needs to learn to depend less on accessories and more on his own strength. You wouldn't understand, Roderick. Modern medicine sometimes seems cruel. But enough with the lies. Roderick slammed his fist against the wall, making the doctor recoil a step. I want my son's wheelchair now, and I want explanations as to why the house is in this state, why the team was dismissed, and why, for God's sake, my son looks like he hasn't been fed or bathed in days. The doctor straightened her posture, assuming an air of scientific authority she always used to intimidate. Roderick, you are a brilliant businessman, but you don't have medical training. Trust my professional judgment. What we are doing here is laying solid foundations for Matthew's independence. Yes, it is a painful process, but necessary. Children with disabilities need to learn early on that the world will not adapt to them. Roderick felt the blood rush to his head. How could he have been so blind? How could he have entrusted the most precious thing in his life to someone capable of saying such barbarities? But I want you out of my house right now, he said, with terrifying calm. And tomorrow I want all the reports, all the medical records, all the treatment logs you supposedly performed with my son. Dr. Marsden smiled sideways, regaining her composure. I have a contract, Roderick. You can't fire me like this. And as for the reports, they were all sent weekly, as agreed. I have your email confirmations of receipt. Get out now. Or I'll call the police. Something in his tone must have convinced the doctor. She picked up her bag, adjusted her impeccably styled hair, and walked towards the door. You'll regret this, Roderick. No one more qualified than me will agree to care for a child like Matthew under the conditions you offer. Always absent, always too busy to personally check on the treatment. Her last words hit Roderick like a slap in the face. There was truth there, a painful truth he would have to confront. But at that moment, his priority was elsewhere. The wheelchair. Where is it? Dr. Marsden hesitated at the door, then replied without turning around. In the hallway closet, disassembled. After she left, Roderick ran to the indicated closet. He opened the doors and found the parts of the sophisticated motorized wheelchair he had bought in Germany, carefully disassembled and stored in different compartments. The wheels separated from the chassis, the controls removed, the screws in a small plastic bag. It had been meticulous work to ensure Matthew could not, by any means, reassemble it himself. With hands trembling with anger and anguish, Roderick began to put the pieces together. But he soon realized he didn't have time for that now. His son needed immediate care. He returned to the room and found Matthew asleep, his face still marked by tears. He picked up the phone and made 3 calls to St. Jude's Hospital, requesting a private ambulance, to his lawyer, Dr. Frederick Alston, and to Monica, his assistant, ordering her to immediately find references for pediatric rehabilitation specialists, trustworthy nurses, and a new housekeeper. While waiting for the ambulance, he sat on the edge of the bed and held his son's fragile hand. How could he have allowed this to happen? How could he have been so naive as to blindly trust reports and video calls without personally verifying the situation? The ambulance arrived in less than 20 minutes. The paramedics entered with a stretcher and first aid equipment. Their professional glances quickly assessed the situation, and Roderick could see the silent judgment in their eyes. "How long has he been like this?" asked one of the nurses as he checked Matthew's vital signs. "I don't know," Roderick replied, his voice choked. "I've been traveling. I just arrived and found him in this state." The paramedic nodded, saying nothing more, but his gaze said it all. Another absent father who delegated his son's care to others. As they prepared Matthew for transport, Roderick called Monica again. "Cancel all my appointments for the next few weeks. Absolutely all of them. Tell clients I have serious personal issues." "Sir, but what about the merger with the Portuguese company? We're in the final negotiation phase." "Monica, for the first time in my life, business will wait. My son needs me now." He hung up the phone and followed the stretcher to the ambulance. During the ride to the hospital, he held Matthew's hand, silently promising that he would never leave him alone again, that he would be the father he deserved, that nothing and no one would ever hurt him again. But as the ambulance cut through Brighton's chaotic traffic, siren blaring, announcing the emergency, a doubt settled in his mind. How to discover the full truth about what had happened in that house during his long absences? How long had this situation of neglect lasted? Who else was involved? And most importantly, how to regain his son's trust, which had been so deeply betrayed by adults who should have protected him. Looking at Matthew's sleeping face, Roderick knew his life had changed forever, and that the journey that was now beginning would be the most difficult and important he had ever faced. St. Jude's Hospital, located in the elegant Notting Hill district, was known for serving the Brighton elite. Its marble corridors and state-of-the-art equipment contrasted with the precarious reality of most public hospitals in the southwest. There, among renowned doctors and efficient nurses, Roderick hoped to discover the extent of the damage caused to his son. Dr. Marcus Caldwell, director of the pediatric department, personally examined little Matthew. After a series of preliminary exams and a private conversation with the boy, the doctor called Roderick into his office. "Mr. Vance, I won't sugarcoat the situation," the doctor said, adjusting his thin-rimmed glasses on his nose. "Your son presents a worrying picture of malnutrition, moderate dehydration, and multiple pressure sores indicating long periods without changing position." Roderick sank into the leather chair, feeling as if each word were a dagger. "Most alarming," Dr. Caldwell continued, "are the signs of accelerated muscle atrophy, inconsistent with a regular physiotherapy program. In fact, it appears Matthew has not received adequate treatment for at least 2 months. 2 months? Roderick murmured, incredulous. "But I received weekly reports detailing constant progress, daily exercises, hydrotherapy." The doctor removed his glasses, rubbing his tired eyes. "Mr. Vance, I don't know what reports you received, but they do not match your son's physical condition. Matthew has ligature marks on his wrists and ankles, suggesting he was restrained at some recent point." The revelation hit Roderick like a punch to the stomach. The idea of his son being tied up, restrained like an animal, was unbearable. He felt nauseous, but forced himself to maintain composure. "What can we do now, doctor?" "We will immediately initiate a nutritional recovery protocol, treat the bed sores to prevent infections, and implement a gradual physiotherapy program to regain muscle tone. But, Mr. Vance, the psychological damage may be harder to treat. Your son shows signs of trauma, fear of abandonment, and a deep distrust of healthcare professionals. This will require specialized therapy and, most importantly, your constant presence." The doctor's final words echoed in Roderick's mind like a verdict. Your constant presence. That was precisely what had been lacking. That night, he slept in an armchair beside Matthew's hospital bed, refusing to leave him even when the nurses offered a comfortable room in the hospital's VIP wing. He observed every procedure, asked questions about every medication administered, noted the times of each meal. It was as if he were compensating for months of absence in a single night. In the morning, while Matthew still slept under the effect of mild sedatives, Roderick received his lawyer, Dr. Frederick Alston, at the hospital cafe. Frederick, a balding middle-aged man with the impeccable posture of someone who had spent his life in courtrooms, listened attentively to the detailed account of events. "Roderick, this is extremely serious," the lawyer commented, placing his coffee cup on the table. "We're talking about potential medical negligence, child abuse against a vulnerable child, falsification of medical reports. Dr. Marsden could lose her professional license and face serious criminal charges." "I want her to pay for every mark on my son's body," Roderick said, with a calculated coldness that contrasted with the emotional storm within him. Let's take it slow, Frederick pondered. We need to build a solid case. I suggest hiring a private investigator to gather evidence, locate the team members who were dismissed, and check if there are other similar cases involving Dr. Marsden. Roderick nodded, already imagining how he would use his resources to dismantle the career of the doctor who had betrayed his trust so cruelly. Faz, and what about the false reports she sent? I have them all archived. Excellent. We'll compare them with the actual medical records the hospital is preparing now. The discrepancy will be key evidence. Frederick made some notes on his iPad and continued. But Roderick, I need to alert you to something important. In cases like this, questions about parental responsibility often arise. The prolonged absence, the lack of in-person verification of treatment. This could be used against you at some point. The lawyer's words forced Roderick to confront a truth he had been avoiding. He too was responsible for what had happened. Not directly, not intentionally, but his emotional neglect, his distorted priorities, had created the perfect environment for someone like Dr. Marsden to operate freely. I understand, he murmured, feeling the weight of guilt settle on his shoulders. What do you suggest? First, document everything from now on. Every medical visit, every treatment, every bit of Matthew's progress. Second, immediately begin the search for a new care team, transparent and with multiple layers of supervision. And third, perhaps most importantly, rethink your professional priorities. The court, whether legal or public opinion, will look at your actions from now on. Roderick knew Frederick was right. His life would need to change radically. 3 days later, Matthew was discharged from the hospital with a series of medical recommendations and a rigorous treatment schedule. Roderick, who had already begun implementing the changes suggested by the lawyer, surprised his son with the news, "We're not going to the mansion, son. I bought an adapted apartment on Clifton Avenue, closer to the hospital and the beach. A new place for us to start over." Matthew's eyes, still distrustful, brightened slightly at the news. The apartment Roderick had hastily acquired was smaller than the mansion, but infinitely more welcoming. It had a sea view, ramps in all rooms, strategically placed support bars, and a spacious balcony where Matthew could sunbathe and feel the sea breeze. "And the best part," Roderick continued, as he entered the private elevator with his son that led directly to the apartment, "I hired someone very special to help us." When the elevator doors opened, a woman of approximately 60 with grey hair tied in a simple bun and a warm smile was waiting for them. "Matthew, this is Mrs. Adelaide. She's going to be our housekeeper and will take care of the house while you and I adapt to the new routine." Mrs. Adelaide approached with soft steps and knelt to be at the boy's wheelchair level. "Nice to meet you, my dear. I made a chocolate cake to celebrate your arrival." "Do you like chocolate?" The small smile that appeared on Matthew's face was the first genuine one Roderick had seen since his return. In addition to Mrs. Adelaide, Roderick had hired a new healthcare team, this time with a cross-supervision system. Each professional would report not only to him, but also to Dr. Caldwell, who had agreed to be Matthew's lead physician. No team member would have the authority to dismiss the others, and discreet security cameras were installed in the common areas of the apartment, not to monitor Matthew, but to ensure that professionals were fulfilling their obligations. That night, after the first day in the new home, when Matthew was already settled in his ergonomic bed, Roderick received a call from Julian Saunders, the private investigator recommended by Frederick. "Mr. Vance, I have preliminary information about Dr. Louisa Marsden that I think you should know immediately." "I'm listening," Roderick replied, closing Matthew's bedroom door so as not to be overheard. "Dr. Marsden is being investigated by the General Medical Council in 2 other similar cases. Wealthy families, children with disabilities, frequently absent parents. The pattern is almost identical." Roderick felt a shiver run down his spine. "And what happened in those cases?" "Both were silenced with confidential settlements. I managed to find out that one of the families received a substantial payment from Dr. Marsden, and in return withdrew their formal complaint. She bought their silence," Roderick concluded, disgusted. "Exactly. But there's more. I interviewed 2 former employees from your mansion. One of them, Josephine Smith, was your housekeeper until 3 weeks ago. She says she was fired for questioning Dr. Marsden's methods. According to her, She started noticing changes in the doctor's behavior as soon as you began your last sequence of international trips. What kind of changes? First, the gradual reduction of the team. Then, Matthew's confinement to his room under the pretext of intensive treatment. And finally, what she described as cruelty disguised as therapy. Josephine claims she tried several times to contact you, but all communications were filtered by Dr. Marsden herself. Roderick closed his eyes, remembering the communication system he himself had established. All employee messages were supposed to go through the doctor's supervision to not overwhelm him with unnecessary worries. How foolish he had been. Mr. Vance, the investigator continued, Josephine said something I think you should hear in her own words. She's here with me. Can I put her on the line? Seconds later, the trembling voice of the former housekeeper sounded on the phone. Mr. Roderick, forgive me for not doing more for the boy. I swear I tried. When I saw things were wrong, I confronted the doctor. She said I was ignorant, that I didn't understand modern medicine, that I was interfering with Matthew's recovery. Roderick felt a lump in his throat. Josephine, why didn't you insist on speaking to me directly? A heavy sigh preceded the answer. I tried, sir. I called your mobile several times, but it was always your secretary who answered. She said she would pass on the message, but you never returned the call. Then, the doctor confiscated our mobiles during working hours, said it was a new house policy. Another piece of the puzzle fell into place. Monica, his efficient personal assistant, filtered all his calls according to Roderick's own instructions. Only pass on what's truly urgent, he used to say, before embarking on long trips. Josephine, what else did you see? I need to know everything. The worst part was when she started hiding food. She said Matthew needed to earn his meals by completing impossible tasks for a child in his condition. I saw the boy cry from hunger, sir, when I tried to feed him secretly. She installed cameras in the kitchen. Roderick felt nauseous. How had this happened under his own roof? And those videos he sent, the photos where he appeared smiling, doing physiotherapy. Staged, all staged, Josephine replied, her voice choked. She threatened the boy, said that if he didn't smile and pretend to be well in the video for his father, he would spend the night in the dark room. Your son has been terrified of the dark since the accident. Sir? The conversation continued for a few more minutes, with each revelation more painful than the last. When he finally hung up, Roderick was emotionally exhausted, but with renewed certainty, he needed to rebuild his relationship with his son while seeking justice. In the days that followed, the businessman implemented a new routine, completely centered on Matthew's needs. For the first time in years, he didn't open his laptop in the morning to check emails. He didn't take business calls during breakfast. He was present, truly present, at every meal, every physiotherapy session, every moment of his son's day. The first week was difficult. Matthew remained silent, responding only when necessary, avoiding prolonged eye contact. He didn't smile, didn't make requests, behaved almost like an automaton programmed to follow instructions. Roderick understood. It was the behavior of a child who had learned, in the worst possible way, that his needs and desires didn't matter. One afternoon, while Matthew was participating in a hydrotherapy session in the small heated pool Roderick had installed on the apartment balcony, the new physiotherapist, Paula, called the businessman for a chat. Mr. Vance, I'm worried about Matthew. Physically, he's responding well to treatment, but emotionally, he doesn't open up, Roderick completed. Watching his son float in the water with an empty expression, mechanically following movement instructions. Exactly, and without emotional involvement, without internal motivation, physical recovery will be much slower and more limited. Paula hesitated before continuing. Forgive my intrusion, but I've noticed you've been trying to make up for lost time with expensive gifts. The new collection of electronic games, the latest generation tablet. Imported toys. Roderick frowned, on the defensive. I want him to have comfort, distraction. What's wrong with that? Nothing, in principle, but I observe that Matthew barely touches the gifts. What he really shows he values are the moments when you actively participate in therapy, when you sit on the floor to play with him, when you tell stories before bed." Paula smiled gently. "Mr. Vance, your son doesn't need more technology or expensive toys. He needs concrete evidence that he will not be abandoned again." The physiotherapist's words hit Roderick like a slap of reality. All his life he had been conditioned to solve problems with money, to delegate care, to outsource affection. It was how his own father had related to him, and there he was perpetuating the same cycle with Matthew. How do I do that? How do I prove to him that I'm here to stay? Consistency, predictability, genuine participation in his life, and most importantly, listen to what he has to say, even when it's painful. That night, after dinner, Roderick dismissed the night nurse and decided to prepare Matthew for bed himself. He helped his son bathe, dressed him in his favorite Avengers pajamas, and settled him in bed with the pillows correctly positioned to avoid pressure on sensitive points. Then he sat on the edge of the bed, took a deep breath, and said the hardest words of his life. "Son, I'm sorry I failed you." Matthew's large brown eyes widened slightly, surprised by the declaration. "I thought I was taking the best possible care of you, providing the most expensive treatment, the most qualified professionals. But I forgot the most important thing, being present. I trusted the wrong people and left you vulnerable." Roderick felt his voice choke, but forced himself to continue. "I can't change what happened, but I promise that from now on it will be different. I'm here, son, and I won't leave your side again." For a long moment, Matthew just stared at him in silence, as if evaluating the sincerity of his words. Then, slowly, he extended his small hand and held his father's. "Do you really promise?" he whispered, his voice so low Roderick could barely hear. "I promise, with all my soul." The boy's eyes filled with tears. And for the first time since their reunion, he let his emotions flow freely. He cried like the child he was, sobbing against his father's chest, who hugged him tightly, but carefully so as not to hurt his still fragile body. "She said you wouldn't come back," Matthew confessed between sobs. "That you were too busy with work, that I was a burden, that you had a new family in another country." Every word was a stab in Roderick's heart. How could Louisa have been capable of such cruelty? "She lied, son. She lied about everything. You are the most important person in my life. Always have been. Always will be." Matthew cried until he fell asleep in his father's arms, exhausted by the emotional turmoil. Roderick settled him in bed and remained by his side, watching his peaceful breathing, silently swearing he would do whatever it took to ensure his son never doubted his love again. The next morning, while having breakfast on the balcony overlooking the sea, Roderick noticed a subtle change in Matthew. The boy asked if they could go to the beach on the weekend, if his father could read a different story that night, if they could watch the new Avengers movie together. Small requests, simple desires of a normal child, something that hadn't happened in weeks. But the recovery journey was just beginning. Later that afternoon, Roderick received a call from his lawyer that would bring new challenges and revelations. "Roderick, we've gained access to the digital files on the tablet Dr. Marsden used to record Matthew's treatment," Frederick said, with a grave tone that portended bad news. "We found something you need to see in person." 2 hours later, in Frederick's office in Brighton's Old Town, Roderick watched in horror videos Louisa had secretly recorded. Scenes of Matthew being forced to attempt painful movements without adequate assistance, having his wheelchair deliberately placed out of his reach, being psychologically intimidated. "She documented everything," Frederick explained, apparently for some kind of scientific study on forced autonomy in children with disabilities. "We found detailed notes on how he reacted to deprivation of food, water, pain medication." "My God," Roderick murmured. Unable to continue watching, "How could I have allowed this?" "There's more, Roderick," Frederick hesitated, visibly uncomfortable. "We found evidence that she used Matthew's name and other patients' names to divert controlled medications. The medicines that should have been administered to your son were being sold on the black market." The room seemed to spin around Roderick. It wasn't just negligence or cruelty, it was an elaborate criminal scheme, using vulnerable children as a front. "I want to prosecute this woman in every possible sphere," he declared, with a calculated coldness in his voice. I want her to never be able to approach a child again. I want her to lose everything, her medical license, her freedom, her reputation. We'll do that, Roderick. But I need you to understand something important. This process will be public. The media will be interested. Your name, Matthew's name. All of this will come to light. Are you prepared to expose your son to that? Roderick hadn't considered that angle. The idea of Matthew reliving the trauma through testimonies, having his story dissected by strangers, possibly being stigmatized, was disturbing. I need to think about what's best for Matthew. Only for him, not for me, not for my thirst for revenge. In the days that followed, Roderick consulted child psychologists, trauma specialists, and even a retired judge from the family court, seeking to understand what would be least harmful to his son. A public trial that could bring justice but also painful exposure, or a confidential settlement that would spare Matthew further suffering but allow Louisa to potentially continue her practices with other children. The dilemma consumed him. As a father, he wanted to protect Matthew from any additional suffering. As a human being, he couldn't bear the idea that other children might go through the same horror. The answer came unexpectedly, through Matthew himself. One night, while drawing in the living room under Mrs. Adelaide's affectionate supervision, the boy created a disturbing image, an adult figure in a white coat, with an exaggerated smile, surrounded by sad children in wheelchairs. "What is this, son?" Roderick asked, sitting beside him. "It's her," Matthew replied, without looking up from the drawing. With the other children, she said, also needed to learn their lesson. "What other children, Matthew?" "The ones she showed on her phone. She said they had already learned not to be weak, that I also needed to learn." Roderick exchanged an alarmed look with Mrs. Adelaide. There were other victims, perhaps at that very moment, going through the same torment. That night, after putting Matthew to bed, Roderick made his decision. He called Frederick and said, with renewed determination, "Let's go ahead with the lawsuit, but with one condition. We will do everything to protect Matthew's identity. He will not be exposed, will not give traumatic testimonies, will not have his image disclosed. We will fight behind the scenes with all our might, but keeping my son safe." As he hung up the phone, Roderick looked at the illuminated city through the apartment window. Somewhere out there, Louisa was probably already planning her next move, identifying her next vulnerable victim. The idea was unbearable. The road would be difficult. There would be resistance, attempts to suppress the case, pressure for financial settlements. But Roderick Vance, the man who had built an empire from scratch, now had a much more important mission: to rebuild his son's life and trust, while fighting to ensure no other child went through the same nightmare. The news broke on a typical sunny Wednesday in Brighton. Renowned doctor investigated for child abuse against disabled children, local news portals announced. Although the victims' names were kept private, it didn't take long for the press to connect the dots to the son of powerful businessman Roderick Vance. The phone didn't stop ringing that morning. Journalists, business colleagues, curious acquaintances, all wanting to confirm the rumors spreading like wildfire. Roderick instructed Monica to filter all calls and issue only a succinct statement. Mr. Vance will not give interviews on matters involving his minor son and requests respect for the family's privacy at this delicate time. In the apartment on Clifton Avenue, Roderick tried to keep Matthew's routine as normal as possible. The boy had made significant progress in recent weeks. His body, once fragile and debilitated, was beginning to regain vigor thanks to adequate nutrition and daily physiotherapy sessions. More importantly, the sparkle had returned to his eyes, timidly, like the sun peeking through clouds after a storm, but undeniably present. "Dad, can we go to the beach today?" Matthew asked during breakfast, pointing to the sea that stretched majestically across the avenue. Roderick hesitated. The beach would be full of curious onlookers, possibly even reporters. But looking at his son, at that small, hopeful smile, he knew he couldn't deny him this simple pleasure. "Of course we can, champ. I'll ask Ronald to prepare the special beach wheelchair." Ronald, the new nurse who had replaced Dr. Marsden as the health team coordinator, was a tall, gentle man with experience in pediatric rehabilitation at a renowned London hospital. His approach was the opposite of Louisa's, based on positive reinforcement, respect for genuine, not forced autonomy, and constant family involvement. "The chair is ready, Mr. Vance," Ronald informed, entering the kitchen, "and I checked the weather forecast. The morning will be perfect, with mild sun and little wind." Matthew's smile widened, and Roderick felt his heart warm. Small joys, small victories, that's what they needed now. Crossing the avenue with the special beach wheelchair required planning. Ronald went ahead, checking the best route, while Roderick pushed the chair with an enthusiastic Matthew, watching the sea approach. Mrs. Adelaide followed closely behind, carrying a cooler bag with water, healthy snacks, sunscreen, and all the emergency items that had become part of their routine. As expected, some curious glances followed them. A woman even pulled out her phone, looking ready to take a picture, but a firm look from Roderick was enough to dissuade her. They settled in a quiet spot on the beach, under a large umbrella. Ronald helped Matthew out of the chair and onto a special mat that allowed him to feel the sand without getting hurt. "Do you want to go in the water, son?" Roderick asked, watching the boy look eagerly at the gentle waves breaking on the shore. "Can I really?" "Of course you can. Ronald and I will go with you." With help, they took Matthew to the water's edge. Roderick held him in his arms, allowing the small waves to wet his feet and legs. Matthew's spontaneous laughter as he felt the cold water was like music, the first genuine laugh Roderick had heard since his return. At that moment, holding his son in his arms, feeling the sun on his skin and the salt in the air, Roderick had an epiphany. Nothing, no million-pound contract, no professional recognition, no corporate achievement, compared to this simple moment of happiness. So absorbed was he in this realization that he almost didn't notice the woman approaching. Tall, elegantly dressed, despite the beach setting, with expensive sunglasses and a posture that exuded authority, Ronald, always vigilant, intercepted her before she got too close. "Can I help you, madam?" The woman removed her sunglasses, revealing intelligent and determined eyes. "I am Dr. Clara Sutton from Child Protection Services. I need to speak with Mr. Vance." Roderick, still holding Matthew in his arms, felt a chill down his spine. Child Protection Services. Why would they be interested in his case? "Ronald, can you stay with Matthew for a bit? Take him back to the mat." After entrusting his son to the nurse's care, Roderick approached the woman. "I am Roderick Vance. How can I help you?" "Mr. Vance, forgive me for interrupting your family time, but the matter is urgent. And I couldn't reach you through official channels." She handed him a professional card that confirmed her identity. "The service received a serious complaint involving your son and Dr. Louisa Marsden. We are already dealing with this through the appropriate legal channels. My lawyer." "The complaint did not come from your side, Mr. Vance," Clara interrupted, her voice firm but discreet. "It came from Dr. Marsden against you." Roderick felt as if the ground gave way beneath his feet. "What?" "She alleges that you are professionally slandering her due to disagreements over treatment, that you removed your son from recommended therapy, putting him at risk, and that there is a history of parental neglect due to your long absences." The audacity was so absurd that Roderick almost laughed. Almost, if it weren't for the serious look of the child protection officer, the fact that they were in public, and the sudden terrifying realization Louisa was counterattacking. "Dr. Sutton, I have documents, witnesses, and medical evidence of the state in which I found my son after weeks in Dr. Marsden's exclusive care. He was malnourished, dehydrated, with infected pressure sores." She disassembled and hid his wheelchair, forcing him to drag himself across the floor. "Is that recommended therapy?" Clara maintained a neutral, professional expression. "Mr. Vance, I am not here to judge or take sides. I am fulfilling my legal duty to investigate any complaint involving a child's welfare. We need to hear all sides. I understand your job, but this complaint is clearly a preemptive defense tactic on her part. She saw that we were gathering evidence and decided to attack first. It's possible, but we still need to follow protocol." Clara cast a discreet glance at Matthew, who was playing with Ronald in the distance. "Your son seems well cared for now, And from the records I consulted preliminarily, you took all appropriate measures after discovering the situation. Immediate hospitalization, a new qualified medical team, moving to a more suitable environment. I have done and continue to do everything I can to repair my error in judgment. My mistake was blindly trusting someone with impeccable credentials and not personally verifying the treatment. I am paying the price for that mistake every day, Dr. Sutton, seeing the physical and emotional scars on my son. But I assure you, I never allowed or endorsed mistreatment. Clara nodded slightly, making notes in a small notebook. I will need a formal visit to the home environment, interviews with the professionals currently involved in Matthew's care, and eventually a delicate and supervised conversation with Matthew himself. The idea of subjecting his son to another interrogation, to another adult delving into his recent emotional wounds, was agonizing. But Roderick knew that resisting Child Protection Services would only strengthen Louisa's allegations. Of course, provided the conversation with Matthew is conducted by his current psychologist, Dr. Vanessa, who knows his emotional condition and will know how to approach the subjects in a less traumatic way. That's a reasonable arrangement. Clara put her notebook back in her elegant bag. I'll schedule the visit for tomorrow, if that's convenient. After Clara left, Roderick remained still for a few moments, watching the waves break on the sand. Louisa's counter-offensive was predictable, but no less uncomfortable. She was playing dirty, using the system that should protect children as a weapon to intimidate him and protect herself. When he returned to his son, he forced a reassuring smile. Matthew didn't need to carry the weight of this battle too. "Who was that woman, Dad?" the boy asked, ever observant. "Someone from the government who is checking if we are receiving all the necessary support," Roderick replied, opting for a half-truth that wouldn't scare his son. "She's going to visit us tomorrow to see our new apartment and how you're progressing." Matthew nodded, seemingly satisfied with the explanation. But then, surprising Roderick, he asked, "She came because of the bad doctor, didn't she?" Roderick hesitated. He had promised not to lie to his son anymore, not to hide difficult realities as if he were incapable of understanding them, but he also needed to protect him. "Yes, son, in part, yes. Some people need to verify everything that happened to ensure the doctor doesn't harm other children. Is she coming back?" The fear in Matthew's voice was palpable. "No, son, never again. I promise." Roderick hugged his son, feeling his small, still fragile frame against his chest. "No one will hurt you again. Ever." That night, after dinner, Roderick received Frederick in his apartment office. The lawyer brought news about the case. None of it particularly encouraging. "She's playing hardball, Roderick. In addition to the complaint to Child Protection Services, she filed a defamation lawsuit against you, claiming you are destroying her professional reputation with unfounded accusations." "Unfounded? I have medical reports from St. Jude's Hospital documenting his condition." "Yes, and we will use all of that." But she has an elaborate counter-narrative. She alleges that Matthew's condition was the result of his previous condition, aggravated by you abruptly interrupting the treatment she prescribed. Roderick ran his hands through his grey hair, exasperated. "It's unbelievable. How does she sleep at night?" "There's more. She gathered testimonies from other doctors, probably friends or complacent colleagues, attesting that her therapeutic approach, though unconventional, is based on internationally recognized autonomy principles." "What autonomy?" "Leaving a 7-year-old paraplegic child without access to food, water, or basic hygiene." Frederick sighed heavily. "I know, Roderick. It's revolting. But we need to prepare for a difficult battle. Louisa is well connected in the medical community, has an impeccable professional history so far, and clearly knows how to defend herself. What do you suggest? We need those other families, the ones who made confidential settlements with her. If we can get one of them to break the agreement and testify, we will greatly strengthen our case." Roderick nodded, determined. "Has the investigator Julian managed to contact any of them?" "Yes. One. The Alton family, from Plymouth. They have a 10-year-old daughter with cerebral palsy who was under Dr. Marsden's care for almost a year. They signed a confidentiality agreement in exchange for a substantial settlement, but given the new accusations, they may be willing to reconsider." I'll speak with them personally. Frederick raised an eyebrow. Are you sure? You've barely left the house since all this started. You're entirely focused on Matthew's recovery, and he will continue to be my priority. But if we don't stop Louisa, other children will suffer as Matthew suffered. I can't have that on my conscience. The next morning, after ensuring Matthew would be well cared for by Ronald and Mrs. Adelaide during his brief absence, Roderick boarded his private jet bound for Plymouth, the capital of Devon. The city, known for its beautiful coastline and historic port, was home to the Alton family. Charles and Beatrice Alton received him in their home, an elegant residence in the Barbican neighborhood. Like Roderick, they were people of significant means. Charles owned a chain of hotels in the southwest. Their daughter, Sophia, was not present during the visit, as per prior agreement. This would be a difficult conversation between adults. We appreciate your visit, Mr. Vance, although the subject is so painful, said Beatrice, a woman in her 40s with eyes marked by worry. When we heard about your case through your investigator, we were shocked. It was like hearing our own story being told by another family. Charles, sitting next to his wife on the spacious living room sofa, nodded gravely. We thought we were the only ones, you know, that maybe we had misunderstood Dr. Marsden's therapeutic approach. When she proposed the settlement, it seemed easier to accept, receive the compensation, and move on with Sophia's recovery. I understand perfectly, Roderick said. If I hadn't personally witnessed what happened to my son, I might also have accepted a convenient explanation and a generous check. The problem is the confidentiality agreement, Charles explained. If we break it, we'll have to return the settlement amount, plus a penalty. Resources are not a problem for us, but the exhausting process, the exposure of Sophia. I know it's a lot to ask, but there are other children out there possibly suffering right now at her hands, and if we don't stop her, there will be even more victims. Beatrice discreetly wiped a tear. What she did to Sophia? Her voice faltered. Our daughter had nightmares every night, woke up screaming, drenched in sweat, begging not to be left alone in the dark. We later discovered that was one of Dr. Marsden's disciplinary methods, isolating disobedient children in dark rooms. The description was disturbingly similar to what Josephine had reported about Matthew. Clearly, Louisa had a consistent modus operandi. We're scared, Charles admitted. Louisa is powerful, she has connections. Even after everything, she managed to maintain her reputation intact, continue treating influential families. I understand the fear. I feel it too. But her fear is greater, Roderick replied, leaning forward. She is desperately counterattacking because she knows that this time she won't be able to suppress the case with a settlement. We are gathering substantial evidence, and with your testimony, we can finally stop her. The couple exchanged long glances, communicating silently in the way only long-term partners can. We need time to think, Beatrice finally said, to consult our lawyers, to prepare Sophia if we decide to go ahead. Of course, all I ask is that you seriously consider it, not just for my son or your daughter, but for all the vulnerable children who could fall into her hands in the future. As he said goodbye, Charles shook Roderick's hand with unusual strength. Regardless of our decision about the testimony, we want you to know we are with you in this fight. If there's any other way to help that doesn't directly expose Sophia, I appreciate it very much. Every bit of support makes a difference. On the flight back to Brighton, Roderick reflected on the conversation. Even if the Altons decided not to formally break the confidentiality agreement, the mere knowledge that there was a pattern, that Matthew was not an isolated case, strengthened his resolve. Upon landing, he found multiple messages from Frederick on his phone. Something had happened during his absence. He immediately called the lawyer. "Roderick, where are you? We've been trying to reach you for hours." "I just got back from Plymouth. What happened?" "It's Louisa. She gave an exclusive interview to Health and Wellness magazine. It's on the cover of today's issue. How renowned doctor reboots accusations. The truth about the innovative treatment being slandered." Roderick felt his stomach drop. What did she say? Basically, she twisted the whole story. According to her, you are an absent father who, feeling guilty, is trying to shift responsibility. She claims her therapeutic method was showing results, but that you abruptly interrupted it upon returning from your trip, harming Matthew's progress. That's absurd. I have medical proof of his condition. Yes, but she has an explanation for that too. She says the injuries and weight loss were the result of stress caused by the abrupt interruption of treatment and change of environment, not by negligence. And she insinuates that you may have exaggerated his condition in medical reports to strengthen your case against her. The audacity was impressive. Louisa was using the media to shape the narrative in her favor, presenting herself as an innovative doctor, being persecuted by a wealthy and influential father. And the worst part, Frederick continued, she mentions that other cases similar to yours were resolved discreetly, insinuating that your refusal to accept an amicable settlement demonstrates dubious motivations. Did she really mention confidential settlements in a magazine? Doesn't that break the terms of those agreements themselves? Technically, no, because she didn't mention names or specific details, but it's a risky move, no doubt. Roderick hung up the phone, feeling a cold rage spread through his body. Louisa was twisting the narrative, positioning herself as a victim, undermining his accusations even before the formal process began. It was a calculated public relations strategy. Upon arriving home, he found another unpleasant surprise. Journalists clustered at the entrance of the condominium. Someone had leaked his address. Fortunately, security prevented anyone unauthorized from entering, but their mere presence was disturbing. "How is Matthew?" was his first question upon entering the apartment and finding Mrs. Adelaide. "He's fine, thank goodness. He didn't even notice the commotion downstairs. He spent the whole afternoon in physiotherapy with Paula and is now playing video games with Ronald." Roderick sighed with relief. At least his son was protected from the media circus that was starting to form. Later that night, after putting Matthew to bed, Roderick met again with Frederick and Julian, the investigator, to discuss strategy. "We need to respond to her interview, Roderick," Frederick insisted. "We can't let her control the narrative. I don't want to expose Matthew to the media. He's been through enough trauma." "I'm not suggesting that. But you, as a father, I could issue an official statement, short, direct, reaffirming the basic facts and your determination to seek justice through appropriate legal channels." Julian, who had remained silent until then, cleared his throat discreetly. "I have more information that might be relevant. A former employee of Dr. Marsden contacted me after seeing the interview in the magazine, Nurse Tanya Sterling. She worked directly with Louisa for 3 years and says she witnessed similar abuses with other children." Roderick straightened in his chair, suddenly alert. Would she agree to testify? Yes, and more. She says she has documents, personal notes, even some photos she secretly took when she started suspecting something was wrong. She was fired 6 months ago when she questioned Louisa's methods. This was the kind of witness who could turn the tide, someone from the inside with direct knowledge of Louisa's practices, without the complication of confidentiality agreements. "I want to meet her personally," Roderick decided, "and verify these proofs she mentions." "I've already scheduled a meeting for tomorrow," Julian informed. She preferred a public place. She's scared. She thinks Louisa might try to intimidate her. Looking out the window at the city lights, Roderick felt the weight of every decision he would need to make in the coming days. The battle was intensifying, becoming more public and dirtier than he had anticipated. But one thing was clear. There was no turning back. For Matthew, and for all the other vulnerable children who might cross Louisa's path in the future, he needed to move forward, regardless of the personal costs. In the next room, Matthew slept peacefully, without bad dreams for the first time in many nights. His small body was slowly regaining strength, his physical wounds healing. But the real battle, Roderick knew, would be to heal the invisible wounds that neglect and mistreatment had left on his son's soul. And for that, he would need not only justice, but time, constant love, and a dedication that no business empire could ever replace. The Black Coffee House. A small cafe in Brighton's Old Town was the chosen location for the meeting with Tanya Sterling. Situated in a restored historic building, with centuries-old stone walls and large windows, the cafe offered the perfect balance between public and discreet, tables far enough apart for private conversations. but constant movement that made any attempt at eavesdropping difficult. Roderick arrived 10 minutes before the scheduled time, accompanied by Frederick. They chose a table at the back, from where they could observe the entrance. The strong aroma of freshly ground coffee and cheese bread coming out of the oven created a welcoming atmosphere that contrasted with the tension Roderick felt. "How will we recognize her?" he asked Frederick, as he discreetly checked each person entering the establishment. Julian said she's about 30, short curly hair, and will be wearing a navy blue blouse. Precisely at 10 o'clock, a woman matching the description entered the cafe. Her restless eyes scanned the room until they found Roderick. She walked towards the table with hesitant steps, firmly clutching a leather bag against her body. "Mr. Vance?" she asked in a low voice, extending her hand. "I'm Tanya Sterling." Roderick stood to greet her. "Thank you for coming. This is Frederick Alston, my lawyer." Tanya nodded nervously, sitting down and keeping her bag on her lap, as if fearing someone would take it. "Would you like some coffee?" Roderick offered, trying to break the ice. "Yes, please. Very strong." She tried to smile, but the result was a tense expression that didn't reach her eyes. After the waiter brought the coffees and left, Frederick began the professional conversation. "Ms. Sterling, Julian informed us that you worked directly with Dr. Louisa Marsden for 3 years and witnessed problematic situations." Tanya took a sip of coffee, as if seeking courage in the bitter liquid. "Problematic is an understatement, Dr. Alston. What I saw was systematic abuse of vulnerable children." The frankness of the statement surprised Roderick. "Please, tell us what you witnessed." Tanya took a deep breath. "I was hired as an assistant nurse by Dr. Marsden in 2021. Initially, she seemed like an exemplary professional, dedicated, rigorous, always up to date with the latest research. Her focus on autonomy for children with disabilities seemed progressive, even innovative." She paused, stirring her coffee with a spoon. The first signs appeared about 6 months later. Small things. At first, she intentionally prolonged the interval between pain medications, saying that dependence on painkillers hinders adaptation to the new reality. She left children calling for water or food, arguing that they needed to learn to deal with natural discomforts. "And no one questioned it?" Frederick asked. Some tried, but she had answers for everything, always based on some obscure theory or scientific article that no one had time to verify. She intimidated the team with her seemingly superior knowledge, making us feel ignorant or too sentimental for modern medicine. Roderick recognized the pattern. Louisa had used precisely the same tactic with him, presenting technical terms and references to international studies to justify her actions. "When exactly did you realize something was fundamentally wrong?" he asked. Tanya looked directly into Roderick's eyes. "It was with a girl named Eleanor, the daughter of a diplomat who was serving abroad. The mother also traveled frequently, and the child was under Dr. Marsden's exclusive care for weeks. Eleanor had a partial spinal cord injury, with a good prognosis for recovery. But Louisa..." Her voice faltered, and she took another sip of coffee before continuing. "Louisa practically tortured her psychologically. She hid her wheelchair, denied her access to the bathroom, left her lying in the same position for hours, causing bed sores, all justified as development of resilience or confrontation therapy." "Like my son's case," Roderick murmured, feeling a mixture of nausea and anger growing within him. Yes, the pattern was always the same. Children with absent parents, wealthy families, conditions requiring prolonged care, perfect for her to implement her method without constant supervision. "Why didn't you report it sooner?" Frederick asked, in a professional but not accusatory tone. Tanya lowered her eyes, visibly embarrassed. "Fear. Louisa is extremely well connected. When I voiced concerns, she subtly reminded me that she could destroy my career with a single phone call, that no one would believe a nurse against a doctor with her prestige. And I needed that job. My mother was ill. She depended on me for expensive treatments." Roderick nodded understandingly. The power of people like Louisa came not only from her credentials, but from an entire network of influence meticulously built over the years. "What changed now?" he asked. "I saw her interview in the magazine. The way she twisted everything, how she presented herself as a victim. It was revolting. I couldn't stay silent, knowing she will continue doing this to other children if no one stops her. Tanya opened her bag and took out a USB drive. Here are my proofs, reports she asked me to falsify, altering weight measurements and functional progress, photos I secretly took of children with bed sores and signs of malnutrition, notes of the explicit instructions she gave to keep patients in degrading conditions, and audio recordings, some team meetings where she detailed her method, unaware that I was recording. Frederick took the USB drive carefully, as if it were a fragile treasure. This is extremely valuable, Miss Sterling, but I must warn you, formally testifying against Dr. Louisa Marsden will expose you to retaliation. I know. I've already lost my job anyway. After she fired me, I can't find placement in any hospital or clinic in Brighton. She fulfilled her threat to blacklist me in the market. Tanya smiled sadly. I'm working as a private caregiver now, earning less than half of what I used to. Roderick felt a wave of admiration for this woman who, even with so much to lose, was willing to stand up against injustice. Tanya, regardless of the outcome of this case, I want you to know, your job is guaranteed. I have connections with several hospitals and clinics. No one with your professional integrity should be punished for doing what is right. Her eyes filled with tears. I'm not doing this for a job, Mr. Vance. I'm doing it because I can't sleep properly anymore remembering the faces of those children. After another hour of detailed conversation, in which Tanya provided names, dates, and specific circumstances of neglect cases she witnessed, they said goodbye. Frederick went to his office to analyze the material on the USB drive, while Roderick returned home, where Child Protection Services would make their scheduled visit. Dr. Clara Sutton arrived punctually at 2 p.m., accompanied by a social worker. Roderick received them with professional courtesy, showing himself completely open to inspection. Please, feel free to check everything. I want you to see that Matthew is receiving all necessary care. The visit was thorough. Clara inspected the apartment, checked the accessibility adaptations, examined the medications, the physiotherapy program, the hygiene conditions. She spoke with Mrs. Adelaide about the daily routine, with Ronald about the care plan, and with Paula about Matthew's physical progress. Finally, the moment Roderick most feared arrived, the interview with Matthew. As agreed, the psychologist Vanessa would be present to mediate the conversation, ensuring it was conducted sensitively. I prefer that you talk in his room, where he feels safest, Roderick suggested. Can I wait out here? Clara nodded. It's better that way. Children tend to filter their responses in the presence of parents, even if unconsciously. The next 20 minutes were some of the longest in Roderick's life. He remained in the living room, pacing back and forth, imagining what his son might be saying, whether the questions were bothering him, whether painful memories were being relived. When the bedroom door finally opened, Vanessa came out first, with a reassuring expression. That went very well, Roderick. Matthew was amazing. Clara and her assistant followed, with neutral professional expressions that Roderick couldn't decipher. Can we talk privately? Clara asked. In the office, with the door closed. Clara finally allowed her strictly professional demeanor to relax a little. Mr. Vance, I'll be direct. I see absolutely no merit in the complaint made by Dr. Marsden. On the contrary, everything I observed today indicates that Matthew is receiving exemplary care in a safe and loving environment. Roderick felt an enormous weight lift from his shoulders. More importantly, Clara continued, Matthew's own words are extremely revealing. Without any prompting from our side, he described in disturbing detail the treatment he received under Dr. Marsden's care, and his words are supported by the physical and emotional scars he still presents. So the case is closed? Roderick asked, hopeful. The Child Protection Services case against you, yes. I will recommend immediate dismissal of the complaint due to an absolute lack of foundation. Clara paused significantly. However, based on what I heard today, I am legally obliged to open a formal investigation against Dr. Marsden for potential child abuse against a vulnerable child. Does that mean Matthew will have to testify formally? Go through this whole process again? Unfortunately, at some point, yes, but we will do everything to minimize the trauma, recorded testimonies in a controlled environment with psychological support, without direct confrontation with the accused. Clara looked directly into Roderick's eyes. I know it's difficult, but his testimony could be crucial to protect other children. Roderick nodded slowly. I understand. We will prepare Matthew in the best possible way, with all the support he needs. After Child Protection Services left, Roderick went to his son's room, who was calmly drawing, apparently not too shaken by the interview. How was the conversation with Dr. Clara Champ? Matthew shrugged, continuing to color his drawing. Normal. She asked how I'm feeling now, how it was before with the bad doctor, if I'm happy here with you. And what did you answer? The boy finally looked up with an impressive seriousness for his 7 years. I told the truth, Dad, that I'm fine now, that you're taking care of me, but I also told her what she did. Other bad things? A tear rolled down Roderick's face before he could stop it. Yes, his son was incredibly brave, braver than he had ever been. You're the bravest boy I know, you know that. Roderick hugged his son carefully. I'm so proud of you. Matthew smiled, a genuine smile that lit up his entire face, something that was becoming more frequent in recent days. He gently nudged his father to show him the drawing he was making. It was a colorful beach, with blue waves, a bright yellow sun, and 2 figures holding hands, one large and one small. That's us at the beach, Dad. When can we go back there? How about this weekend? We'll get some ice cream on the promenade, and then we can put our feet in the water if you want. And can we take Mrs. Adelaide too? She never goes to the beach because she says she has no one to go with. Roderick smiled, amazed at his son's ability to think of others even after everything he had been through. Of course we can. It will be our Sunday outing. That night, after putting Matthew to bed, Roderick received a call from Frederick. I've analyzed Tanya's material, Roderick. It's more devastating than we imagined. There's solid evidence of systematic neglect, falsification of medical reports, to even diversion of medications and equipment that should have been used on patients. Enough for a criminal prosecution. Without a doubt. I'm already preparing the documentation to present to the Crown Prosecution Service. With this, plus the case opened by Child Protection Services and our civil lawsuit, Louisa will face a perfect legal storm. The news should have brought satisfaction, but Roderick felt only a deep weariness. It wasn't about revenge. It never was. It was about justice, about protection, about ensuring no other family went through the same nightmare. Frederick, I want a meeting with the prosecutors as soon as possible. I want to personally ensure they understand the gravity of the case. I've scheduled it for tomorrow at 10 a.m. And there's one more thing. The Altons called. They decided to break the confidentiality agreement and testify. This, indeed, was news that brought genuine relief. With multiple families, a former employee, documentary evidence, and now Child Protection Services' own investigation, the case against Louisa gained irrefutable solidity. Thank you, Frederick, for everything. In the days that followed, events unfolded with surprising rapidity. The news that multiple formal investigations had been opened against Dr. Louisa Marsden leaked to the press. The same magazine that had published her victimizing interview now featured headlines about renowned doctor under investigation for multiple allegations of neglect and abuse. Louisa tried to maintain her narrative of persecution, giving interviews in which she presented herself as an innovative but misunderstood practitioner, a victim of wealthy parents dissatisfied with the inherent challenges of rehabilitation. But as more details emerged, especially after the Crown Prosecution Service released part of the evidence, her defense became increasingly less convincing. A week after that fateful afternoon, when Roderick found Matthew on the floor, without access to his wheelchair, the boy's progress was remarkable, not just physically, with significant recovery of muscle tone and appropriate weight, but emotionally. Matthew resumed adapted classes, made new friends, developed an interest in adapted swimming, and even started participating in an inclusive theatre group. As for Roderick, the transformation was equally profound. The workaholic CEO who lived from airport to airport had completely redesigned his professional life. He delegated the operational management of Tech Britain to trusted executives, began conducting most meetings by video conference, and systematically refused trips that would keep him away from Brighton for more than 2 days. More importantly, he never again missed Matthew's physiotherapy session, a school presentation, or even a simple family dinner. He was present, truly present, not just physically, in every important moment, and also in the seemingly insignificant ones. On a particularly significant afternoon, while watching Matthew practice swimming in the adapted pool at the club they frequented, Roderick received a call from Frederick. "We have important news," the lawyer said, with a note of triumph in his voice. "Louisa has accepted a plea bargain with the Crown Prosecution Service." "What kind of deal?" Roderick asked, moving slightly away so Matthew wouldn't overhear the conversation. "She will plead guilty to professional negligence and child abuse in exchange for a reduced sentence. Even so, she will face severe restrictions, permanent loss of her medical license, permanent inability to work with children in any capacity, judicial monitoring for 5 years, and significant compensation to all affected families. She's going to confess, not go to trial." "Exactly. Which means Matthew and the other children will be spared the ordeal of a prolonged trial. Considering the victims' well-being, the Crown Prosecution Service deemed the agreement to be in the interest of justice." Roderick felt a complex mix of emotions. Part of him wanted to see Louisa face the public scrutiny of a full trial, being forced to hear every testimony, every detail of the lives she had harmed. But the more rational part, the part that was a father above all else, recognized that the agreement was better for Matthew and the other children. "Days, when will it be announced?" "Tomorrow morning. I suggest you prepare, Matthew, explain it in the most age-appropriate way. The news will be in all the papers." That night, after dinner, Roderick sat with Matthew on the apartment balcony. The city lights sparkled against the dark sky, and the distant sound of waves created a tranquil soundtrack for the difficult conversation they would have. "Son, remember we talked about the bad doctor not being able to hurt anyone else?" Matthew nodded, distractedly playing with a small robot he had assembled in science class. "Well, that's going to become official tomorrow. She admitted she did wrong things and will receive a punishment. She won't be able to be a doctor or work with children anymore." Matthew processed the information slowly. "So it's over. We don't have to talk about it anymore." "Largely, yes. It's over. There will still be some papers to sign, some legal formalities, but the worst is behind us." Roderick hesitated, then added, "How do you feel knowing this?" The boy remained silent for a long moment, so long that Roderick began to worry. Finally, with a wisdom that seemed far beyond his 7 years, Matthew replied, "I'm not happy she's going to be punished, but I'm happy she won't hurt other children. And I'm very happy that now we are a real family." Roderick swallowed the lump that formed in his throat. "We've always been a family, son. I just needed to learn to be a better father." "You're the best dad in the world," Matthew declared, with the absolute conviction only children possess. "You know, Lucas in my class has a dad who doesn't even live with him. And Julia, her dad works on a ship and only comes home 3 times a year. You're with me every day." The simplicity of the observation deeply affected Roderick. For Matthew, the measure of a good father wasn't in expensive gifts or impressive structures, but in constant presence, in love demonstrated through daily actions. The next morning, as expected, the news of Louisa's plea deal dominated the newspapers, her photo leaving the courthouse with her head down, alongside her grim-faced lawyers, contrasted sharply with old images of the confident and prestigious doctor who used to appear in health magazines. The media storm lasted only a few days, soon replaced by other scandals and news. For the public, it was just another case of professional negligence coming to an end. For Roderick, Matthew, and the other affected families, it was the closing of a painful chapter and the beginning of true recovery. 6 months later, at a discreet ceremony at the Brighton Children's Disability Support Association, Roderick announced the creation of the Matthew Vance Foundation, a non-profit organization dedicated to ensuring ethical and humane treatment for children with disabilities from underprivileged families. "This foundation is born from a painful personal experience that taught me a valuable lesson," he said in his brief speech. "I learned that true care cannot be outsourced, that active parental presence is irreplaceable, and that all children, regardless of their physical condition, deserve dignity and respect. The foundation not only offered medical treatment and therapies, but also guidance for families, psychological support, and, most importantly, rigorous ethical supervision of all involved professionals. One of its first projects was the creation of a safety protocol to prevent abuse and neglect in specialized care environments. Matthew Chur, sitting in the front row of the ceremony, applauded enthusiastically when his father finished his speech. Newly turned 8, he had become the unofficial face of the foundation, actively participating in decisions and regularly visiting the facilities to talk with other children. "Dad, can we go get ice cream to celebrate?" he asked as they left the event. "Of course, champ. Where do you want to go?" "To the new ice cream shop at the mall. They say it has 50 different flavors." As he drove to the mall, with Matthew excitedly talking about the exotic flavors he wanted to try, Roderick reflected on the journey they had taken. From a distant relationship, based on delegation and compensatory gifts, they had transformed into a true team, united by love, trust, and genuine presence. Roderick's business empire had survived the changes in his professional routine. In fact, Tech Britain was stronger than ever. With a new line of assistive technology products developed from the needs he identified in Matthew's treatment. More importantly, the emotional empire he had built with his son, made not of concrete and glass, but of shared moments, challenges overcome together, and small daily victories. That was truly a legacy he could be proud of. When they arrived at the ice cream shop, Matthew had already reduced his list of flavors to try from 50 to 10, an exercise in prioritization that made Roderick smile. "You know, Dad," Matthew said as they savored their ice creams, "I think we needed to go through all that to get here." "What do you mean, son?" "Before the accident, you worked so much I barely saw you. After the accident, you hired a bunch of people to take care of me, but you were still always traveling. It was only after you came back and found me that bad day that we became like this, truly together." The unexpected wisdom in his son's words struck Roderick as a revelation. Of all people, it was Matthew, the most hurt, the most vulnerable, who could see the greater purpose in his suffering. "You're incredible, you know that," Roderick said, affectionately ruffling his son's hair. "And you're absolutely right. Sometimes we need to almost lose something to understand its true value." As they finished their ice cream and prepared to head home, to the cozy apartment on Clifton Avenue that had become a true home, Roderick made a silent promise to himself and to Matthew. Never again would a crisis be necessary to remind him of what truly mattered. Never again would he delegate what was irreplaceable. Never again would he confuse physical presence with true presence. And so, father and son continued together, not just side by side, but truly connected, a living reminder that even from the most painful circumstances can emerge the deepest transformations and the most valuable lessons. Dear listeners, we hope Roderick and Matthew's journey has touched your hearts and, perhaps, inspired reflections on the true meaning of family and care. This was just one of our stories that explore the complexity of human relationships and the capacity for overcoming challenges that we all carry within us. If this narrative moved you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel, hit the notification bell, and leave a like. Tell us in the comments which city you're following us from and which part of the story touched you the most. Each week, we bring a new story to move, inspire, and make you reflect. Until next time.